Welcome back to Surfcast Podcast. Today we have interview with surf casting expert, big fish crusher, Pete from Phase Fishing, Comanche Fishing, Magic Hour Film. Pete, before I forget, if people want to find out more about Phase and the great stuff that you guys make and offer, where could they find that information?
We have a website. It's phase-gear.com. And then if you just ask about us around, most people know a little bit of what we're doing. And hopefully we got some new cool stuff coming out in the future for everybody.
Cool. And I know that they can find you also on Instagram, social media, also Phase Gear. So just want to get that out there. Make sure everyone could get access to it. We'll also have it in the show notes. Today, we're going to talk about something that, well, not unique to you at all, I do think is something that not a lot of anglers do and certainly don't do well. So we're going to talk about running and gunning for big fish. That's probably a very poor description of it and probably doesn't do it any justice whatsoever. But that's going to be the topic tonight or today or this morning or whatever you're watching. But before we go there, Pete, I want to ask you, how was your season now that the season is sort of wrapped up? You know what I mean. The season never wraps up, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I secretly heard you guys talking before, and I was like, are they talking about bass, trout, salmon? Yeah, season never ends for fishermen, and this season for me was a little bit of a whirlwind. My spring was the worst that I've ever had. And that was surprising to me because it started off really well with a lot of fish and good sized fish for the spring, and then went into a desert. And for me, I've always said I'm super lucky based off of my career and my lifestyle. I'm single. I don't have any kids, and my career, I was a New York City firefighter, so I had a very flexible schedule. So if the bite's on, I was there. If I missed the bite by a day, I was there the next day. And this spring, I had a ton of time on my hands and I could not find any fish. And I think it's a little bit apropos that we're on the eve of making decisions on our fishery coming up. And depending on who you talk to, they'll talk about how the fishery is. But from a guy who spends as much time on the water as I do, because I love it, it's my passion. Like my hair's standing up a little just getting to talk to you guys about fishing. And my spring was awful. My summer was hard again due to many factors: warm water, sharks, not being able to fish where I want, and changing patterns. But I learned a lot this summer, and I think that made me a better fisherman, even though my hands smell more like eels, and now I have circle hooks in my bag all the time, which doesn't make me happy, but you got to do what you do. And then this fall, surprising compared to the spring, is my backyard held the main body of the biofish, which my friends call the Last of the Mohegans. They were in my backyard. So if you asked how the fishery was in Long Island, the right place at the right time, it was really good. But overall, I think the season had just way more ups and downs than I was normal to fishing.
Oh, cool. That's good. Yeah, I mean, you sounds like you're echoing a lot of what we've talked about on the podcast, except that we didn't have any Mohicans.
Yeah, exactly. All I found was deserts, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they'd all been moved onto the reservation. If we want to take that even further, that metaphor, very sad. But we don't want to go there.
No, not today.
Yeah, exactly. I was curious to see how it goes. So.
Yeah, let's jump to something positive, something we can use to work positively on the next season, the upcoming striper season or what have you. And that's like Jerry said, we're going to talk about sort of that running, gunning, but for large striped bass, not the schoolie hunting, chasing kind of stuff. So it brings me sort of the start here, running and gunning, chasing bites, things like that. It's sort of generally thought of as like a schoolie technique, running after birds, chasing after blitzes. There's almost like a randomness to it. Nothing premeditated, nothing planned out. But you seem to do that technique, but applied to big fish. Like, is that kind of a fair assessment to a degree of how you target larger striped bass on a season?
Yeah, I would think so. It's kind of the ADHD way of fishing is how I look at it. My fishing partner, Chris Voorhees, and it's a complete opposite of me, and he's one of my mentors who's taught me a lot about fishing, but we fish in a lot of different ways. It's almost like cement shoes for me to get him to move. But in my head, how I fish is a long time ago when I first started fishing Montauk, the first area that I truly targeted big fish. I was told by an old timer there's two ways you can fish. You could either get to an area, work hard to get there, and spend the whole tide, sometimes two tides, fishing that area knowing that those fish are going to slide through, or you bounce from cove to reef to bowl to reef to bowl and cover 2 miles, 3 miles looking for water that you want. And then rifling through lures that you know they'll eat or have given you success in the past. And if they don't hit, move. And if they don't hit, move. And I'm sure I've zagged more than I should have zigged and missed some really good fish. But to me, I get confidence when I walk up and I see something different. When there's a change, something tells me, okay, it's gonna happen, and a lot of times it doesn't, or it's not gonna happen, and I leave, and it does. But if it's like a war of attrition, you put in enough time in one way of fishing, you figure out what works for you, and this for me works for me.
So when you're setting up that, start your night, we're going to assume night fishing. So like your afternoon's going, you're putting through your mind or whatever time of the day is, you're preparing mentally and physically for an outing that night. What's the first thing you start looking for? What's the first thing you check or start putting into the equation to build your night's plan out?
Wind. 100% is wind. As surfcasters, you guys know better than anyone, is the wind's going to dictate where you could fish, how you can fish, and if you could even possibly fish any of the locations. And then I'll start with that, and then I take the wind into effect, and I'll have a spot obviously where maybe I've caught some big fish, and that's number one. But the wind is going to dictate, well, you can't fish that tonight. Do you go and bang your head into the wall and fish a spot that did have fish or should have fish, or do you line up where it might work? And wind is my number one that I take into effect.
Interesting. That's really that surprised me a little bit. I mean, it makes sense totally, but when you start to line up these spots and after you look at the wind, do you then, pattern a bunch of spots that fish sort of similarly? Or are you trying to fish like alternate conditions? You know what I mean? So like, let's say you're like, oh, the wind is whatever it is. It's going to be in my face. Do you fish a whole bunch of spots that are going to be wind in your face? Or are you like, I'm going to have some that are wind in my face, some that are behind me, over my shoulder, etc. Like, how do you approach that?
Well, it depends on the time of the year. So my wind is going to, in the early spring, I want it at my back. I want it as calm as possible. I want to be able to fish light stuff in areas that I think maybe one big fish is going to come through. During the summer, I want as much protection from the wind as possible so I can get to where I want to get to and fish array of different lures that I think a big fish is going to eat. During the fall, when we have a lot more fish moving around, I want to put myself where the wind's in my face and bait's getting pushed to me, and I know that a big fish is going to use that towards their advantage. So wind direction shifts depending on the time of year that I'm fishing.
Interesting. So in the spring then, you're looking for those conditions that are calm, and then you're basically fishing spots that are most conducive to those conditions. Does that make sense? Is that right?
Yeah, correct. I want to be where I think a big fish is going to be and be able to get a lure to them that I want. Now, I don't, obviously in the spring, I don't want to be throwing a tin to where I think there's going to be a big fish most times. I want them to eat a big metal lip because that's what I think is going to weed out whatever I think the big fish for that time period is going to be, or a huge soft plastic. But I can't throw those things if the wind's in a certain direction. So even though I might want to be somewhere, I'll check that one off the list and say, my numbers game's telling me there probably is a big fish there, but I can't get to him. So what's the point? Let me go to where I can get to and fish what I have that I like the best that I can. And sometimes it pans out, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, nice. I think this is maybe even jumping the gun, but I really want to get to this question right at the beginning because I'm kind of dying to know. When you're doing this, which again, I don't know if this is the right term. We keep calling it running and gunning. Maybe we should start calling it ADHD fishing. Maybe that's what we should start calling it. When you're doing this technique, which I don't think a lot of anglers take advantage of, but I do in the fall, and I've talked a little bit on the podcast. How many spots are you lining up? Like ballpark me. Like you got 3, or do you got 15, or is it somewhere in between?
No, I would say depending on once again, the time of year. Believe it or not, I'm from New York City, so traffic plays a lot into this. even at night, construction on roads, access points, how quick can I get in and out of somewhere? I love my e-bike, and I use it for multiple things, from trespassing to moving from spot to spot to getting into or out of areas that other guys can't just because of parking. So in a night in the spring, I might say I always want to hit I always like difference. I want something different. I want a current change. I want a tide level change. I want shallow, maybe deep, depending on what's going on. I want to be able to hit a couple spots the fish are always there. I mean, you guys know, even in the worst deserts, there's a couple there. They might not be able to get them to eat, but they're always there. So I want to put myself, if one spot they're not eating because the current's too fast, I want to fish somewhere slow. Or I know they're in this area. They're not hitting at the end of the current. They're going to hit at the start of the current. So I want difference, and as many spots that I can line up in a night of fishing or an evening of fishing, I do. So anywhere between three and a dozen, and what I can get to in that time period.
Okay.
Now I gotta say, so jumping back to the wind being the first thing you look at, like that, I'm still, my mind is still hung on that side of it. So I gotta ask a follow up to that.
Yeah.
Because you have not, I don't think you've said the word moon yet. Where in your hierarchy of what, factors, conditions, would the moon fall then? Is it because a lot of guys like, that's so high up and it's like almost automatic that the first answer is going to be moon. And I'm really intrigued that did not come out of your mouth there. And I don't think you've said the word moon yet. So I'm wondering, where does that fall in your spot selection?
So a lot, obviously a lot, but the moon phase is most affecting the current, which is also then affected by the wind. But if I can't reach a fish, if I have a crosswind, I can't throw a plug. I definitely can't throw a soft plastic or an eel or a riggy. So now I'm taking half my arsenal out. Now, a moon, of course, is the current. The main thing with the moon is it's going to alter the main thing that I feel the moon's going to do. It's going to alter how the fish are acting that time period. Now, during the summer, the moon doesn't affect me quite as much because I know I have a resident group of fish. And it also, believe it or not, gives me less of a window, but a much more intense window to catch those fish. So if I feel that all these fish eat at the same current speed, wherever they are, it's just figuring out that speed. And during the moon, it's easier to catch that current speed because it's way more intense. But you have a less time during that window because your tide's going to drop out twice as quick. Your inlet's going to empty out. Those big resident fish coming out of the back, they're only coming out for 20 minutes. They're going to hit the tip of the jetty and then they're going back. Off the moon, you have way less water movement, so you have more time to work it. That's kind of how I look at the moon phases. But of course, most of my big fish have come 3 days before, 3 days after, when you have a better shot at more of those fish being in that area.
Interesting. That's really interesting. So when you say, you want the wind at your back and you're trying to find these in the spring, not you want it in your face, and you said in the fall. Yep. But when you're trying to find these wind, patterns so that you can reach these fish or whatever, but you said you want to change, you want the current change, you want the direction change, you want the depth change. When you're lining up these spots, again, are you saying, all right, tonight I'm going to fish my deep to shallows, or are you saying I'm trying to catch all these changes in current and I'm trying to jump from spot to spot? How does that work? Or are you mixing and matching? I'm really interested in that.
A lot of times it's time of year. Spring, since a lot of fishing I do is in the bays, I want calm, and I want the change to be when the water's dumping out of an estuary or then filling back in. So if I can hit 3 different estuaries in that time period with the current, that's one thing. In the summer, I want a specific current window where I know I can, one, reach those big fish, because a lot of times you can't because of rips that you can't swim through. If there's depth of water that you don't want to get to anymore because of these stupid things with teeth everywhere, there's all sorts of things. But I know 20 minutes on an inky, black, August, gnarly night at 3 o'clock in the morning, if I don't get a hit in 20 minutes at this one spot, I got to be in another spot for that next switch in those 20 minutes. Because that big one's coming in to eat a lobster, to eat a blackfish. And I may only get one hit in 60 days of that fish caliber. But if you hook them and you land them, that's going to be one of these,
The moment.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I shoot for. But a lot of anglers have had success staying in one spot and waiting for that one to come by. For me, once I look in my plug bag 3 times and I'm like, all right, I've already thrown these things 3 different times, hit every spot I wanted. It's don't that metal lip swam past that rock 12 times. That alpha fish isn't waiting in his spot right now. He's either somewhere else or he's got his belly on the bottom and he doesn't want to come up because of the shark, or he just doesn't want to eat that piece of wood coming by because he's had 8 bunker the last 2 days that have been in the area.
Yeah. That's really interesting. There's a lot of things to unpack right there. But I don't want to get too far ahead because there's a bunch of stuff there that I want to talk about. But when you're picking these spots, how far are you planning ahead? Like are you doing this in the winter? I mean, obviously, if you're basing it on the wind, you probably have to be a lot more flexible. But do you have a loose plan, or is it like, I heard Frank G say, for example, he wakes up first thing in the morning, checks the weather, and then he makes a plan. Are you like that, or for me, oftentimes I have a lot of my moons planned out now for July, let's say. Where are you in that spectrum?
Well, when I first started really obviously every really good fisherman or outdoorsman or anything keeps a log. So once I started logging, I've been lucky to have a lot of good mentors, but one of my mentors told me you can't be everywhere. So you need to find areas closest to you that you can get to on all sorts of different weather patterns. That's going to then tell you, okay, you like this spot on this wind, on this moon. You like this spot on this moon, but you're not everywhere. And once you get a small group of friends and other anglers you like, you would say, all right, Toby got a 48 here on September 8th, and Jerry got a 55 here on September 6th, and Chris got a 30, whatever. I started taking a calendar and writing these bites out, and you'll see that they all kind of line up. And I guess like a baseball player, you got your wish list. You hope you're getting that fastball coming, right? When it's 3-2, because the pitcher's got to put it there, but you might not be able to. Maybe it's 0-2 now. You got to hit anything to get on base. So I'll pick these windows and I'll say, oh, dude, I really want to be in Marich's Inlet for this window, this bite, but the wind's off. All right, cross. All right, what else that time period had a big fish? Oh, Montauk also did. Oh, okay, circle that one. Maybe I can get there. And how many spots can I hit? Or maybe I can hit Marich's and Shinnecock and Montauk in one run in a 2-day period. And that's giving me my best shot. So I obviously have a wish list of like 3 spots that I'd want to be, but the wind and the tide, but mostly the wind's going to dictate. I can't fish there. So here's where I'm going to try.
Very interesting. Very interesting. How long, again, maybe this is getting too far ahead, but how long are you staying at each one of these spots on average? So like let's say you got 8, like you got a hierarchy of 8. I'm assuming the very first one you go to, well, actually, I take that back. You're probably, if you're trying to hit a current change, then it's dictated by time and not by hierarchy. Maybe the 4th one is your favorite one, but you can't go there first, right? So, but how long do you stay at a spot, let's say, if there's no fish? And then I have a follow-up to that one.
Not long. If the water's, I'll stay at a spot till the water's doing what I feel is going to be my best shot of the big fish. And then I'll rifle through the lures that I have which are usually not very many. I'll rifle through the lures that I have. And if I don't feel like a change is going to occur, then I leave. Inlets, I'll stay a little longer because I'll try and hit both swings, both sides of the slack. But open beach, rock piles, it could be 30 casts in the window that I think. And then I move. I say, all right, that's not going to happen for me here. I'm going to go try something else.
Now, what happens if you get some fish that are moderately sized? Obviously, well, not obviously, I'll let you answer, but if you pick up some schoolies or teen fish, I'm assuming that's irrelevant. But what happens if you get a 27-pound fish? What are you thinking?
The size of the fish that are in the area don't dictate anything that I'm doing. It's more, unless I'm catching lots of them. If I'm on a bite of 15 to 20-pound fish, my guess is, unless I want to stay to slack and try and hit that really big one, I'm going to move. Something's got to give me a feeling saying, all right, we got to go. Like, all right, I caught a couple fish, but what's changing? Nothing. The current's the same speed. I haven't seen anything different. I gotta I got to say, either tonight I'm happy with this. Maybe the time's coming at 6 a.m. I know I'm going to hit traffic going back to New York City, or I'm saying, oh man, I got one more spot. I got a light change coming. I got a current change coming. It's worth the hour and a half of banging my head into my steering wheel on the way home. Because if you get that big one, that's an hour and a half is only 3 phone calls to your buddy.
Yeah, that's right.
That big one, there is no traffic when you catch a big fish.
That's funny. Yeah, that's really funny. So a follow-up to that then is, if anglers are struggling to move on, right? Because I agree with you. I think that's profound what you just said. It doesn't really matter what the fish are there, because if the window ends or the water changes, then it's over, right? It doesn't matter if you caught 3 fish in the first 10 casts and now it's been 15 minutes and you're like, oh, it could change again or something. But what do you tell anglers who are having struggle moving on, who maybe have some years under their belt, and they're like, I've caught enough 15, 22-pound fish. I want to catch a 37. What strength do you lend them, Pete, to get them to move and leave those fish?
I think it all depends on what you want to catch. I mean, I just had an interview recently with a really good angler, and we talked about something an old timer told me is you start off wanting to catch a lot of fish. First you want to just catch a fish. Then you want to catch a lot of fish. And then you want to catch a really big fish, but at no point can you do all 3. So it's whatever you feel best with. Whatever. That's the cool part about it. I think the great part about surf fishing is it's whatever satisfies yourself, because it's just you. I mean, it is, you do with your friends and your crew and all that, but what satisfies you? Maybe seeing somebody else catch a fish is what satisfies you now. If just going out and catching a bunch of fish satisfies you, but if you want to catch a big fish, whatever relevant big fish is to your area, that's what your time and effort has to put into. That's what your tackle has to get put into. That's what your mindset has to get put into is, I'm going to miss a lot of nights of not catching any fish. But when I get one, maybe that's the fish that's going to lead me to the next one. And you start that pyramid upwards of, oh, I got a 15-pound fish. That was really cool. It looked cool. It was 15 pounds. I just got a 37-pound fish that I thought was 64 pounds, so somebody put it on a scale.
Exactly.
But I mean, that thing, look, it's 2 fists in it, and its belly's out, and it's big, and you say, wow, I want to catch it again. And then you like, how do I get a bigger one? And then you see a 45, and you're like, whoa, that 45 just made that 37. So what's next? And I think when anglers start dedicating to that level of, I want to catch that really big one, everything else goes to the side. You can't be at the good bites. You can't be at the current windows when there's lots of fish. You have to be solo. You have to be giving up time. You can't fish with other people, because if that big fish comes, there's only 1 or 2 of them. If there's 5 other guys fishing, there's 5 chances that fish eats those 5 lures, or is tricked and takes a swipe at one, or takes a hook. That fish is saying, I've been here before. Somebody's going to choke me, flash a light in my face, and throw me back in. I don't like that.
Yeah. That's great, Pete. So this, to me, I mean, even as someone who's very intense and does this sort of thing, this is a fairly intense mentality, to put it lightly. Toby's laughing.
Making me tired just thinking about it.
That's because Toby knows we fished in the same areas. I think I've seen him one time.
Yeah, exactly. Toby knows. How does someone, so the biggest thing I feel like someone who's listened to this and said, yes, I want to up my game. I want to start adding more spots to a night of fishing. I don't know how to do it. How do they add to their portfolio? So how would you suggest they start lining up spots? How do they figure it out? How do they find, not necessarily how to find spots really, but how do they go apart this process, of adding to their portfolio? How do you add to your portfolio of spots?
Just reading, honestly, reading fishing books, listening to podcasts of guys that fish, talking to old timers, going. I mean, every time on the water, it's 100% the most important thing. It's time on the water. Doesn't mean it's casting. And it's time on the water. You walk out to a jetty, you talk to an old timer that's been bait fishing, and he tells you he's caught 8 50-pound fish here. Well, maybe they're not 50, maybe they are, maybe they're 60, but he's caught 8 big fish here on this time. Okay, well, circle it, write it down. The guys are happy to share information on stuff like that. Like I always say, I try and learn something, I put it in my bag, and I put it in my bag, and I put it in my bag, and I put it in my bag. And then when I need help, I open my bag up, I dump it on the floor, and I say, oh, okay, this piece of puzzle, this piece of puzzle. And hopefully it helps me, put it together. But if the more you can put in the bag, the more time you go out and talk to people, find places, get your spidey senses up. Like you'll feel it, like, oh, this is it. This is going to be good, or this isn't going to be good. And that's how, for me, that's how it's worked for me. Is I've had a lot of good mentors. I've read a lot. I love reading about fishing. I love hearing the interview with you guys and Joe Pavia blew my mind. Blew my mind. Right. Blows my mind. Like complete opposite of how I would fish. I want an 8-inch 6-ounce metal lip in front of that fish. And Joe's saying it doesn't matter what swims in front of that fish. He wants less hair on the bucktail because that fish is just going to hit it at that time window. But it's honestly, I guess the word is profound to see how different guys who also like catching big fish think. And it's different areas. Yeah, we're fishing different. But that in my head is I'm fishing an inlet now. Now I'm not fishing where Joe fishes, but I'm fishing an inlet. I'm thinking guys are like, oh, you should put this tail on that tail. It don't matter. If I put that lure in front of that fish's face when it wants to eat, that's the most important thing. He's going to take a swipe at it. And then landing them is a totally different story. But once you get that hit, wow. And I mean, I'm not talking about like out of the drag. It's, and your reel seat, you're like, oh God, it's my reel like moving in the seat, and you lose that fish, all right, okay, this spot's held the fish that I want to catch.
That's right.
That's one. Put it in the bag. And you just add from there.
Nice. That's sick. You're getting me excited. Toby, you excited?
Yeah, right. I wish I could get out and fish again now. I wish I hadn't started putting my stuff away.
So here's a question in opposition to what we were just talking about, which again, maybe is skipping ahead, but it's on my mind now. You line up all these spots, let's say again, 8. It's my favorite number. That's why I'm using it. You line up 8. You get to spot 3. And besides like, oh, I caught, I've just landed 6 40-pound fish, which obviously would keep you there. Is there anything that would keep you there? Is there really something that you've run into either sporadically or on a regular basis where you end up bailing on the other spots and you stay through what might be the normal window or the change?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like back to Spidey sense and mentors. If Chris has fished a spot and said, hey, listen, it's going to be a desert for a little while, but if bunker comes through, it's going to change and and you're going to get fish. If something happens that makes me want to stay, or Jerry, you get a 46-pounder when I didn't think that 46-pounder should be there or in that spot. All right. Well, in my head for the rest of the year, for next 2 years, for whatever is, okay, I got to stay a little longer. I got to put my ADHD down and say, hey man, you don't 100% know. I learned it this year big time. You don't know this spot. You think you know this spot and you think you know these fish, but it's a fish. It's going to change. Mm-hmm. And that'll keep me there. And that also now has me fishing other areas that in my head would never hold a fish. Yet somebody I've fished with has taught me or showed me, look, yeah, they're there too. Like, oh man, really? Yeah.
So
okay.
Talk to me about Spidey sense. Don't let that go. I can't let that go by. What are you talking about when you're talking about that?
That's the same thing. It's change. It's anything that's been different. And it works fishing all over the world. It's a predatory fish. If you see something that's going to make your spidey sense say, hey, Maeve, there's a front coming in. Obviously, stay a little longer. Fish a couple more spots. Or hey, the sun's up. It's bright out, and I want to fish tonight. Do I really want to put a little more time in here? Nah. Let me go get some sleep. Me and Chris have talked about this even recently. Like. We learned it more in filming the movie is you only have so much time that you could really put in and give 100% effort. And if it's that time of year or that moon or that condition that you want to put all your effort in right there. And if you're messing around at another time, then you're not going to put it in. If that makes any sense. That kind of tells Spidey sense like, hey, I should give up right now because I really want to fish in the morning because this is what I've seen or I talked to this old timer and he said, this is a first light spot. All right, well, do I really want to pound 2 more rock piles, ride 4 more miles on my bike? All right, tonight I'm going to go home, get some sleep, and I'm going to be there at first light, and maybe I'll get a giant on a pencil popper.
Well, I kind of guess I was going to say, leading off of that, is there a reason, like, do you have a factor or something where you set your night up and we'll use Jerry's 8 number. He keeps liking to joke back. You got your 8. Let's say you're at spot 3. Is there a reason you're going to cancel it and say, look, tonight just is not, or do you continue to grind through figuring, I lined this up. There was a reason today when I was a little more clear-headed that I put, A to B to C to D to E to, and I'm only at D, I'm calling it. Like, is there a good factor or something you look for that, or you try to just push through those?
I like to try and grind more when I think it's going to happen. Like I do, I give up too easy sometimes. I'll leave a spot after only a couple casts to find out that one of my fishing partners really put it on them. But yeah, the water clarity, weed, just a constant frustration of bowing the line. Like how many sluggo casts can I take and not catch up to it? Like come on, like I'm only getting this amount of fishable water in my cast, and I know they're only eating sluggos. I'll say, you know what? I might get a good one here. Everything's what I want it to be, but something's wrong. I'll quit and say, all right, my grind is going to continue, but now my grind's going to have to be 3 more days instead of this night where I'm satisfied with whatever happened.
Interesting. That's very interesting. You've alluded to this already, but I want to make sure we talk about it. When you're jumping from spot to spot, are you changing your plug bag? Or does that go into your factor of decision? So like, for example, are you not changing your plug bag because you generally fish the same things, which I know is a common theme, and maybe that's what you're going to say? Or is it more like, well, wind's at my back, I'm fishing these current change, the moon is this, so I know the current's this, so I know I'm covered by this bag. Like, how do you choose your plugs on a night like that? On these nights, I should say.
My plug bags are usually pretty simple. It's a 2-tube with go-tos, right? And go-tos meaning I want to reach a certain type of water, then I want to cover that water column, and then that's about it. And that's my go-to bag. Is I don't really, color doesn't, I think if they see it, they're going to eat it. Unless they see it too well, then they won't eat it. And then color only matters when it matters. So that could be a whole podcast for itself. But
yeah, we're all on the same page, it sounds like. But yeah, keep going.
So, yeah, I'll have a 2-tube bag with that. And then I have a 1-tube bag with my like beast slayers, where if I now found something, I want to go bigger. And a lot of times I think bigger is going to weed out a smaller fish, because I don't want to be handling a smaller fish in a window that I think a big fish is there. And then I have a little soft plastic bag. And then the only thing that changes in there will be weights. When I go to an inlet or something, a 2-tube bag might come off, and the soft plastic bag is now going to be 3 times as heavy. And I got to go through my weight of lures of where I think they're going to be. But I'm not a profile guy. I'm not a color guy. I'm a try and find that fish that's eating and get them to eat.
Yeah. Presentation. You're really talking about presenting it to them where they're feeding. Really. Yeah.
So real quick, that's single, the I forgot what term you used.
Beast Slayer, I think is what he said.
Slayer, yeah. So I'm a big ass metal lip or something like that, probably.
Well, I call Chris Voorhees lures the bullies, because they bully every other effing lure out of my bag, because I can only carry so many. But there's a big Voorhees metal lip. Yeah, depending on the time of year, whether it's going to be a surface pikey or a deep dive, or most likely it's just going to be a regular troller. There's an eel skin needle. Most of them your buddy John made for me, Jay, and they're absolute slayers. And I always have an eel skin something in the bag. Doesn't matter the time of the year. And then a huge soft plastic, something ludicrous that I could throw. And this year I was taught that the biggest sluggo I could possibly throw and rig is going to be what gets the job done.
Nice.
But yeah, no more than 2 or 3 in that bag.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of that, so that's the Beast Slayer. Someone who maybe is thinking about doing this, do you have in your go-tos, your complement of lures, you're like, really honestly, if you want to start lining up spots or whatever, these are the things that I carry in my bag most of the time, outside of, a 40 knot gust or something like that,
Yeah, nighttime. We're just talking nighttime.
We're just talking nighttime, yeah.
Right. So you got a needlefish that you could cast really far, and then work in different parts of the water column. A super strike bottle plug is 100%, because that thing casts like a bullet. And it also, Chris taught me a long time ago, is not only is it a fish finder, it's a current finder in certain spots, because that thing thumps your rod, and only when it finds current. So you could be swimming through dead water and then feel boom, 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 dead water. boom, 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 boom. And those are just cutouts through those rock piles. And now you're like, oh, okay, that one's got current, that one's not. I can reach that one with a metal lip. So yeah, needlefish, super strike bottle. I'm trying to think through my bag right now. Probably a basic metal lip that I could throw. SP minnow.
Oh, interesting. Stop right there. Stop right there. Time out. Time out. SP minnow.
Yeah, of course.
Nice. Talk to me about that, because Toby and I hate it all the time, so we'd love to hear support
I
for
said
it. I'm not even joking. It sounds like a joke, but I'm not even joking. I really want to hear some positivity about it, because people love it.
Yeah.
It's a great lure. It's easy casting, and fish will tell you they're in the area with that. And they may not be big fish, and it may not be what I want, but it's going to tell me there are fish there. That's a place I want to come back to at a different time. They're going to whack the thing. Everything eats that thing, and then it casts well. It's cheap, and yeah, it's great. I've caught some big fish with it. Now, sometimes I think the SP minnow catches big fish because big fish eats a metal up. He eats it either sideways or a stick shad. You got the thing jammed in its mouth and it spits it out half the time. You get a big fish in an SP minnow, it's back here. It engulfs it, and that fish ain't coming off. You're going to stick that fish 99% of the time.
So then the question is, how do you rig it?
Just one belly hook.
Okay. What size?
Like a 2.0 or 3.0, depends. Okay. Yeah, just one big belly hook.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
It'll tell me that they're there, and then and then a lot of times I'll have the night saver is a small mag darter. And it's the last thing I want in my bag. It's the last thing I want to take out of my bag, but I've seen it catch so many fish and big fish in locations where, okay, nothing's happening. For some reason, the water's not moving the way I want, or you throw a little black one of those, it's gonna get eaten too. I know it's not what you want, and it's like but it's in there. It doesn't take up much room.
No, it certainly doesn't. I've made this argument to Toby too, offline. They're the smallest plug I think you can catch the biggest fish on, like the dichotomy. They're so tiny, but they still give you that shot at the larger fish. They're special in that way, I think.
Yeah, it takes up no space in my bag.
Zero space. It's not in there.
That's funny.
I've had too many nights with a bag full of metal lips only to help a guy land a fish and see a stock mag darter in their mouth. And go, oh.
And you're like, how? Why?
Yeah, why?
That's really funny. I interrupted you though with the SP minnow. Was there anything else that you missed besides the mag darter, which you just added in?
Yeah, a darter, depending on how the water moves. Super strike darter, North Bar, wooden darter, Beachmaster darter. That'll all base off of what water area. But yeah, always a darter. Yeah, and I think honestly that covers it for me for like a redfin goes back and forth.
Okay.
Because I can't cast it really well, even the way I load it. But it's another one that will get hits when nothing else does.
So then the next question is, and you've kind of already talked about this a little bit, but with these different lures, which that's a pretty good complement of bag. I mean, that's similar to maybe to what I would carry. And Toby, I think you too. I mean, there's, a good number, but not crazy.
Yeah.
You put the lure on, you put the mag darter on, put the mag darter on.
It barely fits on the clip, by the way.
Yeah.
How many casts do you give that before you go to the next lure?
That one? 3. I'm not kidding. It gets 3 because I don't have a ton of confidence in it, but I know what it does. Other lures will get more. Needlefish gets a lot.
Okay, what's a lot?
Maybe for me in a lot, maybe 10.
Yeah.
Because I want to let it hit the bottom and I want to bring it back. I want to bring it across the top really quick and see if something's going to chase it, and then I want it across the middle. A darter is going to get less because it's going to swim primarily in the same area. It's not as versatile to cover water. And a bottle will get a little bit more for the same reason. I'm not just looking for fish. I'm looking for current.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I do something similar, and I actually think Toby is pretty similar too. And I think this actually puts us in the minority because I think a lot of guys get a lure and they stick with it for 15 minutes or whatever. But do you have a home base? Or do you cycle through the whole bag? So, for example, what I mean is for me, I often use the Super Strike darter or the Sluggo as a home base. So I'll do like a darter for 6 casts, 8 casts. I'll go to something else. I'll come back to the darter. And then I'll do something else, come back to the darter. And then I'll put the Sluggo on. And then, do you do something like that? Or do you rotate through your whole bag?
No, I exactly what you said. If I've had success in that area, like as you're speaking of that, I'm thinking about a certain spot in Florida. that I know the North Bar bottle darter. I mean, that's the one. But some nights they want the paddle tail, and some nights I can't reach them with that. But yeah, I'll look in the bag and say I'm going to go to something different, but that one comes out first. Yeah. So
Jumps
yeah.
up.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's interesting. So what's in the soft plastic pouch?
A ton of it also depends on how the wind condition and where I have to reach. But I'm a huge proponent of the no live bait needed just because one, they're very streamlined and aerodynamic how they've made the heads and the actual plastics themselves, and they're super durable. And on a good bite, I mean, these fish destroy everything. So I've got it zip tied, glued, and I want to carry as little as possible. So I want two straight tails of a certain weight. I want a little 5 inch that I could throw really far, maybe one or two weights, and then I'll go to the stuff for bigger, like the big sluggos, or I like the big hoagies on a light jig head sometimes. And then of course there's three riggies stuffed in there too to make everything smell awful. But definitely also get the hits.
That's a good profile. Before we run out of time, when do you absolutely not run and gun? When are you like, you know what, this is a time you should, I will absolutely not run and gun. I'm going to sit on a spot for 2 hours or 3 hours or 6 hours or 12 hours, whatever it is. What is there times when you do that? I'm assuming there are.
Like preemptively, I'd say.
Yeah, like you're like, tonight I'm going to go stand on that rock for 4.5 hours, let's say, or whatever.
Can't.
Okay.
I can't unless I'm catching. If I'm catching, or if I'm with a newer angler and we can only get to one area and they don't want to run around, because it can be very frustrating. And honestly, I've fished with so many good guys that have now taught me. There's a certain fisherman that I fish with all the time, and I've multiple times have I said, all right, last cast, and then he hooks another big fish. And then we talk at the end of the night, and I'm like, did you want to leave when I said last cast? He's like, no. He's like, I was going to, but then I get this big one, and I was just doing it for you. But it's frustrating because we all fish different, and we all have spidey senses. And somebody's spidey sense may say, I gotta stay. And when you respect the guys you fish with, you do stay, and then you learn from them. So the only time I would stay is if a fishing partner was like, hey man, I don't want to run around anymore. Let's just stick this tide out. Okay, that's cool. That would be, or a new guy who just isn't going to be like, I don't get it. Like, why are we going everywhere?
How do you maintain this level of energy? So, I mean, mentally and physically. Like you must, I mean, it sounds almost silly to talk about, but you must work out. I mean, you have to keep yourself in good shape. But how do you keep this level of drive? And I'll let you go from there. I'm not going to give any more.
I love it, dude. I don't know what else to say is I love it. Like the success that you feel when you catch whatever fish you are personally looking for is what drives me, because it could happen. It's like anything in life. The harder you work, the more you put time in, the more you don't give up. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. That's the only way people are ever better than anybody in life is they're the ones that have never given up. So in my mind, I feel if I keep going, it's going to happen. It may not, and it's frustrating, like when it doesn't happen, but it always happens. It's just a matter of time putting it in.
How long until?
Yeah, how long it's right. It's going to happen,
I gotta circle back on one last thing before we get to the end here. You kind of mentioned in passing earlier, we haven't talked a whole lot about eels in general on the podcast. And you had mentioned, I believe I caught it right, that you used eels a bit this year.
Yeah.
So my question just regarding that, everything we've been talking about so far, how you're working through your spots and is plug related. When you're going out, are you carrying both? Is it an eel night or a plug night? Or is it, as you're going spot to spot, it might be like plug spot, eel spot? Or is it both are on your body when you go and you're making the cycling through, just like you'd be cycling through your plugs, the eel makes in rotation? Do you understand?
I mean, it's a great question that I'm not a good eel fisherman, so I can't give a really good answer. But yeah, I've been fishing certain other spots within spots that the fish want the eels, and I have to really think, okay, don't reach for the plug, don't reach for the. So I've been trying to come up with 8 different ways to carry eels to cycle through, and the one that's told me the best way to do it is just carry just the eels and learn how to fish them and change your techniques and just accept the fact that if that's what the fish want, that's what the fish want. And I was just taught that by my fishing partner who said, "Hey man, we got to come here. We got to throw eels. This is how it is." And he did it, and he had, I think, 6 fish over 40 pounds in 6 casts. They were all really good fish, and I couldn't get one over 20 that night. And the next night we went back, and still I was stubborn and said, it's not a live eel thing. It's just this. And then he caught a 48 pounder that we probably thought was close. It was one of them tankers, like if it had 2 more inches, it was 55 pounds. It was just didn't have that little extra. Anyways, he caught this giant fish, first cast live eel, and I was throwing dead eels just because I was stubborn. And he's like, you have to do a live eel. And it came down to the last one. He's like, put this thing on. It hit the water, same retrieve, whatever that was doing for those fish. And it got eaten. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So now the rest of the season, I've got a eel jug. I wrote somebody online, hey man, I need to buy an eel jug next year. Trying to figure out how I'm going to keep these stupid things alive for 1 or 2 spots. But just the eels for them.
Yeah, no, that's how I if I'm doing eels, kind of like I have to just commit to it for that spot. If I have both, I've said it before, if a plug's on, I think should be throwing an eel at that moment and vice versa. And it's like this constant battle. And the only way I can eliminate it is if it's physically not an option on me. So, yeah, I was wondering how you dealt with that, being how you are approaching these spots, because how you're approaching a lot of this, your night and your spot, is so different from how I am. So I didn't know if you'd figured it out yet.
No, it's the only way. And you said it the best, is if I'm throwing anything else, I'm thinking, oh man, it should be eating this. It should be, I'm not reaching them. They're not here. But watching an expert eel fisherman fish an eel, and actually this person in particular for 2 years fishing this area kept saying, should I bring eels? Should I bring eels? I'm like, no, dude, we're going to do this, this, and this. And then this season, it was like, he's right the whole time.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I went through a whole season with someone I was fishing with, and I had never gotten a fish over 30 pounds at this particular spot. I'd caught a lot of other fish. This particular person fishes eels, and the whole summer I watched him catch fish, and the whole summer I didn't catch any fish. But I'll tell you, then one night he didn't come because the surf was up, and it was wild, and there was waves, and I caught 330s in that single night. So I guess I just needed to fish one night, and he could catch fish for 25 other nights on the eels. So, Pete, we're kind of getting to the end here, and I hate to end it, but we're definitely running out of time. And before we do, I'm going to ask you a completely off-topic question, unless you have anything else to follow up, Toby. I don't want to jump the gun.
No,
okay.
That's fine.
So you've done some world traveling now at this point, surf casting, and besides the striped bass, do you have a standout fish that you're like, oh, this was so awesome to catch in the surf? Or like, do you tell other people, oh, besides the striped bass, this is my other favorite? Do you have something like that?
You know the answer to
Yeah, I know the answer, but I want you to say it.
You just got back from them torturing you.
Yeah, yes, absolute torture, yes.
The tarpon is by far my favorite fish. From my first hookup to my first landing to seasons of not being able to land one, that fish has everything a striped bass has, including patterns and feeding habits and how you target them and where you target them. And you could and anglers that set up just to fish one way. Like they were like our striped bass, but bigger and faster and stronger, and they torture you the whole time. And it's a tarpon, man. They're the best.
Yeah, they're the best.
So
they're
has it stepped over the striped bass in your hierarchy yet?
No, because there's something about the East Coast and like the feeling of that fall air, or like I said, that inky night in August when you just know. The tarpon it's a different type of fishery, and it's a little bit of a different camaraderie. Striped bass, I could talk to all my friends about it, and I could go online, and the new Surfcasters Journal's out, and I'm reading about striped bass, and it's juicing me up. Tarpon, unless you talk to a fly guy in the Keys or read a really cool tarpon book. If anybody wants to read Lord of the Fly, did you read that one?
Yep.
Oh my God, I want to be in the Keys tonight.
Yeah.
Get a flats boat and
great book. It's good.
It's really good.
Yeah, it's really good.
But striped bass is what I started with. It's what fuels how I love fishing, and it's who I could talk to about and just be passionate. But tarpon, I'm coming for you in 3 days. I am. I'm going to go load my bag up tonight.
I'm quite a few years behind you in terms of tarpon, but I feel very similarly. You pretty much summed it up to me exactly. It's kind of amazing, isn't it, that there isn't more information and that there isn't more people doing what we do up here down there for that. Not that there isn't, but it seems like 50% of them are people coming down from up here.
You have to understand down there is we have just striped bass as a game fish, and now tunas have become much more accessible, and maybe a little bit of black fishing. But from the surf, we just have striped bass. Down there they have tarpon, snook, redfish, pompano, you name it. They have assortment of fish to target, and each angler likes to target. Most of them are single species anglers where they like this one, and it's accessible all year. And tarpons are motherfuckers.
Yeah.
There's no other way to put it. Like,
yes.
They're going to break your stuff. They're going to ruin your night. They're going to frustrate you. And the most that you're going to get from a tarpon is a cool picture.
That's right.
So,
and they're going to break your heart. They're going to break your heart.
A lot of broken hearts to get there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A lot of broken hearts. Yeah. Okay, well, that's interesting. I was hoping you were going to say that, but I wasn't sure what you would say based on your travels.
I was hoping you weren't, because tarpon get too much love already on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been talking about him a fair bit. I'm trying to twist Toby's arm. I'm trying to twist his arm, get him down.
Come down this winter. Come fish with me. You'll feel it. That first time that thing inhales the soft plastic, and you're like, oh, it's a good snook. Oh, what is that? Whoa.
Yeah.
He's gone. You're like, wait, you were just here. How are you gone? At 400 casts later, you don't get another bite. You're like, I got to do it again. When are we going? Please go down.
Yeah, see, that's all my tarpon experiences have all ended in heartbreak. Every single time I've
because that's tarpon fishing.
Not very many chances on them, but they have all ended up with nothing on the end of my line. Whether it's because of jet skis or bridges or whatever, they've all ended that way. So
I feel your pain, Toby. Like my ratio of hooking to landing is way worse than most guys. Like guys will tell me I got 3. I'm like, I didn't get 3 in 2 years, dude. But I love it.
See, we got to have him on more because he's making me feel better. Because I was just the episode that just came out a few weeks ago, we did our lessons from the log, which is where we recap what happened in the last month. I talked about this, and I talked about how much they're bastards and how it's insane that you can set a hook on a fish 7 times. It could jump 3 or 4 times, burn off a bunch of drag, and then somehow jump 1 more time and spit the hook. How is that possible? It's insane. I don't understand it. They're magic. They're from, Al Albano, he recently caught his first big one, and he said it was like stepping into another dimension. He's stepped into a whole other dimension, and I agree. I feel like that's fair. It's wild. So,
well, maybe I'll get one under my belt at some point, and then we can have you back on, and we can talk about the tarpon, just the tarpon talk one night.
Yeah. Let's go get one together. We'll go after ICAST next year.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Pete, thank you so much for coming on. This was an amazing conversation. I am my heart's pounding. I'm so jacked up now. I'm ready to go. There's literally snow in the yard, and I'm like, who cares? Where we're going? We're going. Like, let's go. So, thank you so much for coming on again. We encourage everybody to check out FaZe. Make great stuff. Check them out on social media. And again, thank you so much. Toby, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Although I don't know if I appreciate the fact that you got me just as jazzed up as Jerry's saying to go fishing right now because I got no time and no fish around. But I appreciate it nonetheless. Maybe I'll watch. I'm definitely gonna circle back to this episode come spring or summer when I need that motivation. I appreciate that audience joining us today, Pete.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, fellas. I had a good time. I'm jacked up now too. I might grab my rod and go fish. There's actually a couple around. So
cool.
Thanks for what you're doing too, and highlighting all different anglers. Like I said, I watch and I love to hear other people's perspectives. Like the Joe Pavia one, like it's great. And keep up the good work, fellas.
Cool. Thanks, Pete. This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com, or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.